Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ala McCoy. I am Director of Startup Support at the University of Maryland's UM Ventures. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone who joined us today for the next installment in Startup Fundamentals Workshop Series, both live webinar audience and those watching a recorded version of on our Startup UMD YouTube channel. This workshop series is offered by UM Ventures in collaboration with MTech at the Clark School of Engineering and Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship at the Smith School of Business. Everyone attending the live session, please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A function. You can generally find it at the bottom of your screen. Sometimes it could be at the top. This session is recorded, will be posted on our Startup UMD YouTube channel. You can submit your question anonymously if you would like. So today, I am very happy to welcome our entrepreneur in residence, Doug Humphrey, who is a successful serial entrepreneur, investor, and startup mentor. And Doug will talk to us about a very sticky subject on how to divide founders' equity. Doug has done that multiple times, many times, and also helped countless companies doing that as well. So thank you so much, Doug, for joining us. I get this question a lot from especially new startup founders. It can be very tricky. So thank you so much for talking to us about it. The microphone is all yours. Let me know when you want me to move the slide.
All righty. Hey there, good morning. And I'm Doug. And if you have any questions, like Ala said, you can type them in or do any of the things. And I only have like 4 slides here because it's really just framing a discussion as much as anything else. Founders equity. So this is always a weird topic, a little sticky topic. A lot of people don't talk about it, and yet, you're never going to take a company anywhere unless you have an understanding of how to deal with equity, ownership in the. Some people say, well, why would I give any equity away at all? And you might not. I mean, if you are able to do all of the things that the company needs and demands, and you're able to fund all of the funding requirements for your company, you probably own 100% of your company, and that's not a problem. But what you find often with startups is that they have the ideas, and maybe they have enthusiasm, and they have energy, they have time to invest in the company, but often they don't have money. And not only do they not have money, but they may not have all of the skills, they may not have enough person power to really do what they need to do. Eventually, and maybe even very quickly, a lot of ideas turn into, wow, I really need 4 people to do this. I need sales and marketing and stuff going on. I need some code written. I need to be out there talking to customers and deals. There's a lot of stuff. And so how does a company get access to these resources, people, material, all sorts of stuff, without having the money to access that stuff? And the answer is that in the modern world of companies and startup companies and venture capital financing or seed financing from individuals, in this modern world, there are people who will take a chance and they will use their money. They'll give their money to your operation, to you, in return for a share, an ownership share of the company. And they do that, of course, in the hopes that the company will become successful, and that down the road, not immediately, they may be able to sell some or all of those shares to other people who are interested in buying at a profit. So, it's a swap of owner. It's usually basically using ownership because you don't have enough money. Sometimes big companies even who have the money will have a discussion, because they'll say, well, money is the most universally useful, the most fungible thing. Money in the bank is a way to deal with problems and issues and situations and opportunities that pop up in the future, unforeseen maybe. And so money is kind of the universal solvent, the universal fuel for this. So there are times when a large company might say, you know, we're going to go borrow money and not use the cash that we have. We would rather take some debt. We would rather issue some equity maybe in order to keep our powder dry, so to speak. Now, that's getting down the road. So founders' equity. It's important for the founder of the company or founders, multiple, to really have some understanding of this. Oh, good, excellent. A founder is the originator, maybe the owner of all of the initial equity. You know, you go say, I'm going to start a company to do this thing. I'm going to start a company that's just me and I own all of it, which you do. You know, and then founders, well, often there's an early group of people who come in very early on. And this can be an issue of contention. This is one of the reasons why you need to think these things through and get this stuff right. You know, it's not always there can be only one. You know, it's not just there is a monolithic founder. 3 people, 2 people, 5 people could be sitting around and say, we're going to start this company. In that case, they would all be founders. You'd all have to figure out a solution to make that work. But in most cases, there is usually a founder, or maybe 1 or 2 founder, and then there are the founders, which is more of a group name for, as it says, in most cases, 1 founder and members of founders, plural. You know, people who come in very, very early, and generally people who are involved in this very early equity discussion and situation that we're talking about, those are kind of called the founders. So when somebody uses the term founders or whatever, until you need to get a little more information to really know what they're talking about. Next. So equity generally refers to actually owning these shares in the company. You will hear that, but for a few reasons, that's kind of impractical. Let me give you an example. Let's say the 3 of us are all sitting around and we fire up a company and we go, well, we should own it a third. Okay, you know, and we do the paperwork and each of us has now a stock certificate that says that, you know, the company consists of, you know, 99 shares of stock and all A, B, and C all own 33 shares. Here's the paper, you know. Well, that's great. At that moment in time, that may be a fair distribution. And one of the struggles of equity is always trying to get things, make things as fair as you can, given that you're making a decision right now at a point of time that then has to live across a longer timeline. Now, let's say all 3 of us work really, really hard on this, but person B, Dave, just gets distracted, does something else, goes and does other things. You know, and at some moment in time, you know, A and C are sitting here working our tails off, and we realize that we haven't seen Dave in a little while. You know, we talk with him, and, you know, but it just becomes really obvious that Dave is not putting in, B is not putting in the way A and C are putting in. And at some moment in time, it can even be that that Dave has decided to go to California, get involved in other things, and, you know, doesn't really contribute at all. You know, very quickly, you're going to have a problem because A and C are going to be like, you know, we only own a third and a third, and Dave owns a third, but we haven't seen Dave in like 6 months. So, you know, we're not sure that Dave should own a third of the company. But at this moment in time, you can't literally, unless Dave agrees, unless you say, Dave, we need a better deal. And Dave might very well say, oh, you know, you're right, you know, why don't you guys cut me back to like 10%? I'll give back the other. And, we can go on because we, ANC, are going to argue, the company is going to argue, look, all that extra ownership you have, not only is it a fairness issue, but that stuff was meant to compensate a person to do this work that you're no longer doing. So if we let you keep it, not only are you keeping ownership that you did not earn, but that is ownership that was going to go entice some other good programmer, some other good marketing person, whatever, to come into the company because you're not doing that job. So double whammy, if you will. But if Dave does not cooperate, then all of a sudden you're really up against a problem, because when you gave those shares, that was outright ownership. And the problem with outright ownership is it lasts forever, right? So instead, you have something that we're on the screen here we call options. And this is really what you would call an employee stock option plan, an ISOP or something, or SOP, whatever. So what you do there is you say, okay, well, all three of us are here, we're doing our stuff, and we all have options for a third of the company. And we decide that, let's say, at what point in time can you really say that someone has put in enough effort that you can say, yep, that chunk of shares should be yours? Usually these are like 3 years, maybe, sometimes 5 years. Now, it is weird to have a date on this, but that's why you set it out there a little bit. And you say, okay, so here's the deal. Every week, every month, our stock plan will vest. And vesting means you get to keep. Now it is yours, the stock, when it vests. So you say, here's a third of the company over 36 months, divide that all out, 1/36 of your 33%, you get that at the end of day one, or 1/12, on monthly, you get that on the end of month one, month two, month three, month four. And that way, then when you terminate Dave, because Dave has flown off to California and is no longer helping, you have a much fairer thing because you say, look, Dave, you worked like hell for, 12 months, and then you worked some for 6 months. We're at the 18-month mark now, do you want to come back or not? And if not, we'll terminate you, and you vest in your, year and a half, your 18 months of the stock. That is now yours forever. Good. But the rest of that now comes back to us. And to be technical, it would not necessarily come back to A and C. It would really come back to what's called treasury stock. If the company can own stock that is not actually allocated out to individuals, that could happen. So that sounds a lot more fair, right? Because the guy got compensated for the time he was here, but the company did not overspend its stock, on time when he was not working. So we talk about option plans. There are all sorts of ways to do this. If you do an option plan, there's something that you'll file. You should file paperwork with the IRS called an 83B 83B as in boy election. All that does is it turns this vesting schedule, flips it backwards, so that in the beginning, you get to own all of the shares. But the company has a right to do what's called a clawback on all of the shares. And every month that you then are in the company's right to clawback goes down by a month. The effect is exactly the same, but when you declare 83B to the IRS, you're saying, hey, I have all this the stock in this company, and it is worth zero, nothing, because the company isn't even really going. And that means that you pay taxes on none of that until you actually go sell it way down the line. And you're going to have a tax bill there no matter what. But the point is, you do not have to suddenly up front get surprised by some weird tax bill. So that's,
Doug,
yeah.
there's a question about vesting. Can I read that to you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Who decides if if for that vesting period the option would vest or not?
So if you have options, then you have a written employee stock option plan. And it is laid out in that plan how it works. You would probably assign vesting decisions in an ISOP to maybe to the board of directors. So it would take an ISOP to stop an ISOP, or to alter the trajectory of an individual's operations under the ISOP. You may need a board vote. And that's often a good way to do things in a small company, because a board in a small company is either 3 people or at the most 5 people. Less than 3 does not work because it can deadlock. You need an odd number. 4 is not the number of the counting, leads to go directly to 5. Sounds like the holy hand grenade. And more than 5 is unwieldy, So, you start with 3, which gives you 2 extra seats that you can give to people as you need to. So probably board of directors. The board of directors are also the people who have the authority to alter the whole plan, right? If it was decided that the ISOP plan for everybody needed to be changed and altered, who would do that? That would be the board. The board can delegate that kind of, authority, but often if you get to the point where the board is going to delegate the authority, it's often not to the president or CEO of the company, because by then you may have actually gotten big enough that you have someone who's running like HR and employee issues. Sometimes it can get delegated to them. Remembering, of course, that their word is not necessarily final if the board decides to overrule that. The board of directors, in the end, because of and via the bylaws of the corporation, and those bylaws are a legal document which is filed in the state that you're incorporated. So if you're incorporated Delaware, that set of bylaws is filed in the state of Delaware, and it's a legal document, and it's a binding document, and you can go to jail for violating that document. Well, I don't know about jail, maybe. I don't know if they're criminal statutes, but they're certainly civil statutes. So probably the board. Now, often on a really, really small company, the board sort of is the president of the company, or it's the president with some people board members, but they follow the direction of the president, CEO, founder, pretty much most things. But this very thing about employees and stock and stuff may actually be one of the first places where there can sometimes be a break between the board of directors and the CEO, who's probably a member of the board, but there are going to be 2 other members. So if the CEO is trying to do anything particularly strange or outrageous, the other 2 members of the board may actually say, no, that's not right. We need to figure this out. I hope that helps. Go to the next slide. You have a lot of, this is sort of like a layer cake a little bit, you have the founder, which might be 1 person, might be 2 people, 3 people, whatever. Your founder is the person where you were there at the very beginning, the idea, the very beginning of this, and has the dedication to carry it forward. if the founder stops pushing the cart will stop. This is just, eventually you hope that's not the case, but we're talking early here. This is your baby, you sacrifice for its success, Founders, multiple people during the founding. And so these are the people who are close in, and they're not just employees. These are people who have the early buy-in, they have the skin in the game. They probably worked on this without getting paid, et cetera. The guy who comes wandering in and says, look, I need 200K in a corner office. I don't think he's even on this slide. Collaborators, these are people who are helpful to the company, not necessarily employees of the company, One of the things that stock ownership is about is not just compensation, but also the alignment of interests. If I'm doing a pharmaceutical company startup and I know several people who could be very helpful in, feeding me leads, they know people that, they've been in that game for a long time. They might be a retired person who's got great contacts, a scientist who happens to have worked for all of these companies and knows people, someone who's going to be useful to your company, to this company. I would say they fall into really the collaborator's role. They're helpful. They can span like a wide array of things, and they have access information that you don't have without them. What you can do, subject to any conflict of interest that they might have, but ignore that. If they're working for another company and said they would never take stock in a competitor or whatever, but as collaborators, part of your job as a founder may very well be to go to these people and, find them and say, I want you to be a friend of my company. I'm Coffee Cup Pharmaceuticals, and we're doing these things. I really need your help. Well, you can look at those guys and say, some stock options might be available for this. Now, let's say one of them says, well, I could really use some cash. Cash at this stage of your startup, this is what we call in the VC-ish world, not a good use of proceeds. If you have done a funding round and gotten your hands on some cash, this is the rarest thing. This is the thing that can solve problems. This isn't something you dedicate cash to. But what you would say to them is, also, when you pay somebody cash, they got the cash, now they're gone, right? A collaborator, you say, well, what I'd really love, because I think your help to us is going to help us be successful. What I would really love to do is get you some stock options. And that way, as our company grows, your value in our company will grow as well. And that one is what I call aligning interests. When this guy hears some news, or this guy hears that, some project, this or that or the other, an opportunity, he's going to know that sending them to you is probably in his interests. Because if you guys fail, his stock is worth nothing. But if you guys have success, hey, maybe that buys a car, maybe that puts a kid through college, whatever. That little bit of stock is good. So collaborators, stock is interesting. Early employees. So not talking about founders, founders could be, look, you worked for 6 months with no pay or whatever. One of my companies, I worked for a big company and I couldn't quit the big company because literally my salary was paying for the startup, but my company offered what's called sabbatical. And I took was it 4 months, 3 months? I don't know. I took a sabbatical. And as part of the sabbatical, they were like, oh, okay, great. By the way, do you want all your pay for that period up front? Will that make it easier to do your sabbatical? I was like, well, that would be nice. And so I got 3 or 4 months pay up front, which is great because It went to buy a pair of Sun 400 servers that we needed for our startup. So early employees, often maybe Joe is making 130,000, everything's okay in his life. And he looks at you and says, look, I'd love to come work for you in the beginning, but I got to have work. Okay, I can't pay you. But then later on, he's like, I still want to come work for you. And I mean, I'm making like 130, and I think I can get by on like 80, And you can then go, excellent, because maybe you've progressed a little. And maybe now you're like, would love to have you. We'll do a deal, we'll pay you 80. We'll take you up to pay you 80 for 6 months, 8 months, take you up to your 130, and then beyond take you up more. But we really appreciate that you can save us the money because we don't have any money, but we got enough barely to pay you that. That guy, that girl gets some stock options, no question, because they're sacrificing for you when you need them to do that. And you go, look, here's some stock options. Thank you. We'll make this all work. And then regular employees, well, there are companies who don't offer stock options for regular employees. I think a lot of those tend to be very big established firms. Walmart wants you to do this. Here's your job. You do. And they have so many people and it's so complex. And they may be just, I don't know if they do, they might have stock options. I don't know. But, but if you're talking about a small company, stock option plans are how you keep your employees. A little teeny startup may not be, Microsoft's waving 300K at this guy, and you're paying him 150, but he does know that if he goes to Microsoft, he's going to stop vesting in his stock here. It's something. Microsoft will offer a stock plan too. Theirs will be safer because they're already public, et cetera, but it certainly is not going to be as generous or worth as much potentially as what he's getting with a small startup, So usually, especially with a startup, and I mean, we're talking tech startups, but this can be a lot of startups. You're usually looking at trying, and besides, there's also overhead. If you already have an ESOP in place for founders and board members and early employees, then if you already have one in place, it's not a lot of work to then just say, oh yeah, we'll cover employees too. Click it. As you go through a timeline in a company, you from the idea all the way up to up and running operations, whatever, you've got founders and multiple founders, kind of a hybrid. Here's where you get into your collaborators, people who help. Collaborators is also, let's say, somebody who's not an employee, but he goes, hey, look, I'll work a couple nights a week on that code for you. I'll write code for you, And he could be a guy who writes apps. This happens with app development a lot. And he says, okay, look, on the side, I'll do some app dev for you, But I don't want to be an employee of your company. I don't want to do that stuff. But you're my buddy. We went through school, I'll do a little for you. I'll cut you a beta. Those are collaborators also. You got development, early employees. You have production where you're actually now making the thing or whatever. And then you proceed into operations and real employees, and you become a real company. Good. Click. So I think there's one more slide. Yep. Now, this mathematically there may be mistakes in here. I don't know. I saw like 10 versions of this, and it doesn't really matter. You'll get the idea here. There's a thing called dilution. Now, this is why we talk in terms of shares outstanding and not, well, we humans like to think in terms of percentages, because percentages is based on saying, look, there's a whole pie, and that whole pie is 100%. And how big is my slice of that pie, Is it 25%? Is it 10%? Is it 5, 2, 1? Well, that really doesn't work that way on the paperwork. The paperwork talks about shares. And that is because shares aren't reissued. Stock certificates are sort of like cut and then they go in a safe somewhere and then that's it. And when we get 3 more people in the company who all get stock option plans, all of our percentages change. I mean, starting point. Here's Jane. Jane is starting the company. She's got 100% of the company. Here's David. David comes in for 30% of the company. Well, now Jane has 70% of the company, right? And there's 30 and it adds up to 100. That's how we humans sort of think about the pie. But the reality on the books is Jane had 100 of the 100 shares that were issued in the company. David came in and got 30 more shares. Well, we didn't take 30 from Jane. We just issued 30 more shares. So now the size of the pie is 130%, with 100% going to Jane and 30% going to David. So the number of shares, the pie actually grows so that we don't have to take away from each slice. This is just mechanics. Think about it in percentages, it's easier to understand. So, David comes in 30%. So now at time A, we've got 70% and 30% is 100. It says who up there. Ignore that for a moment. Now, who comes in for 30%? But there's, and I think who is representing all this stuff down here. So now what you got is Jane is down to 66.5, David's at 28.5. And then, you have the board of directors, and this is assuming that you're giving, 5% there to the board. Again, you want to incent behavior and you don't want to pay boards cash. You want to pay boards in something that is dependent upon performance of the company. I can explain that. That's a whole other thing. But as this goes down, okay, advisory board is 3, board of directors 2, friends and family comes in. Friends and family puts $20,000 in. That's your first cash fundraising, other than maybe the founders were sticking money in. Friends and family comes in, puts 20,000 in, and they get 5% of that, of the company for that. And they get diluted as other things come in. Now now they're at 4.25 because Wanda came in for 15%. Now, Wanda is a big 15% that late in the game, but there's a story that goes with this. And as I tell in the story, Wanda is a marketing wizard and knows this industry cold. And Wanda sees what's going on here and goes, I can sell your stuff. I can market it. I can sell. I can do it all. And they bring her in. And we kick along for a while. Okay, but we haven't really put a value on the company. People are always like, well, what is this worth? What is that worth? What is that worth? Well, you don't know. You don't have revenue yet, so you can't hang like a revenue ratio. There are no comparables. You can't really get a comparables number, comparing this company at this stage to any other company. It just doesn't make sense. At your first valuation event, it's determined that the company is worth $2.5 million. Now is that post or pre-money? Now we get into pre-money and post-money valuation. This gets complex. So the A round is $500,000 cash put into the company on a $2 million pre-money valuation. So your funder, not founder, funder, a venture capital firm, let's say, looks at it and says, we want in. We think that everything that you have built, all of it, we're going to give you a valuation. We think it's worth about $2 million. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you $500,000 because that's what you need to kind of make it to the next stage. And we in management ask for that. We work with them to come up with what is the right number. Now, that means, excuse me, that gives you a post-money valuation of 2.5 million, because of course it's your $2 million company, and now they have $500,000 in the bank from the fundraising, $2.5 million. So let's look at this. At this moment in time, because that is $500,000 on $2 million is 20% of the shares. So there's 20% dilution for everyone who has come before. Jane is now at, 34% from 43. David is at 14.72 from 18. The board is at 2.66 because everybody gets diluted. Whenever you hear the phrase anti-dilution, it doesn't actually have anything to do with you getting diluted. It's an investor term. There is no anti-dilution. Everybody gets diluted. But you're running down this thing. Friends and family, who was at 3.4, is at 2.7, and Wanda is down to 9.6. We're doing pretty good. The VC get diluted, which is, in their own way. So they're down to 16%. Oh yeah, and you have an option pool of about 20%, and we can talk about that. But that's where the company sets aside some stock to start issuing options to employees, to all sorts of people out of the pool of options. So not founders' options and stuff, but out of a pool that is set aside. And one trick is you do that after you do your first valuation event so that your investor gets diluted too, cuts down on everyone else's dilution just a little. And so now what we have is, if you look at the final chart here, you've got, and now we're gonna raise more money, or we're gonna do something here. Hold on a second. Oh, second valuation event. A little video is in the way. So the second valuation event, we're gonna raise more money. Another looks like 800,000 comes in or something. And everyone further gets diluted. Now the founder is at 24, David is at 10. But as you can see, sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander, everyone gets treated the same. Doesn't matter who they are. Everyone gets diluted when a new player comes to the table. The new player is bringing money, and that's what you need. So you're selling the same amount or the same sliver, same ratio to the investor. And, so a B round, 2 million on a 5 million pre. Now what's happened here is, remember the A round was $500,000 on a 2 million pre. So you've built the company value up to $5 million. So from the end of the first valuation event to the second valuation event, you've doubled the value of the company. When these new funders come in, they look at the company and they go, you guys have done some good work here. I think it's worth 5 million now. And we're going to put in, more money, because by now you guys have a product, you have a track record, things are going good, but now you need the fuel. You're probably darn near out of money here. You really need the gas in the tank, because this is second valuation, second funding is usually, first funding is surviving and moving forward. Second is usually where, a lot of this money is being used for sales and marketing, to actually build product, to fulfill orders, to staff up things that need staffed up. And so the 2 mil comes in. Now the company's got $2 million to go do stuff. And 2 and a 5 means $7 million. That's the company valuation. So as of the money closing on the second valuation, Jane's share is worth 1.7 million. David's 742,000. The board is 5% director on here, 134,000. Friends and family So your friends and family who scraped the kitty, the kitchen drawer, and came up with 20 grand. Well, their shares are now worth 137 grand. So it's not so bad. Now all of these are not very liquid. You can't just turn around and sell them right now. Although there are times when if you wanted to, and usually it has to be kind of a hardship. The VC, the investors don't want your shares. They want you to have your shares. They want you to be maximally incented to work for this stuff. But I have known cases where a great example was, somebody who was in a company up in Massachusetts, friend of mine. He didn't have a lot of his money, his parents didn't have a lot of money. They had some money troubles. And, they were about to close, I don't know if it was second round, third round. I think they were in like $20 million range total, and they mentioned this to one of the VC. I won't say who they were, but they're good guys. And they said, hey, I really need to get my parents taken care of on this. And as a founder, because this guy was one of the three founders of the company, his shares were actually worth, 3-4 million, I guess, maybe 5. And one of the VC said, well, look, we're about to close on I think it was about a $10 million deal to put money in, put in 10 mil. And the guy is like, why don't you carve out, sell us some shares? We'll take, and instead of the company getting $10 million, maybe the company got $9.95 million or $9.954 million. He got a chunk of change enough that he could turn around and take care of his parents' problems. So, and I mean, the VC guy was like, he was amazed. He was like, you can do that? And the VC guy was like, yeah, it's rare, but, I mean, dude, we all trust each other on this one. I mean, we're about to drop $10 million in your pocket. As long as the company doesn't think it's a problem. And the company didn't want to do it through the payroll system because he was then going to get payroll taxed on all that money. And the VC guys are like, we can do this on a capital gain thing or whatever. So it can't happen. But so this is dilution. This is how, the amount that you get, we like as humans to talk in percentages. So your percentage will be going down. But if we were doing this as accountants, if this were a class on venture accounting, this entire table would be done in shares, not in the percentage. Okay, next. Is that the last one? I'm not sure.
This is the last one, Doug.
Okay, so why don't we open it up to some Q&A if any of you guys have questions and answer. We can, try to address things, or just anything you want to chat about. This is like I said, this is one of those more obscure areas that doesn't get really talked about, but I think you can understand, especially in a founding world. Okay, we'll talk sort of the magic of all this stuff. Especially in founding. Oh, go ahead, go.
I was just gonna say, and if anybody has questions, please feel free to type them, or you can also click on raise your hand button, and I can unmute your mic. You can ask your question live if you'd like, if you prefer.
Right, go ahead and ask questions. I'm just gonna
you can keep pontificating.
Talk about some stuff,
Yeah.
So what's very important in the startup world, with a startup, you're selling a dream, you're selling, and this is to everybody, one of my, and selling, a lot of people think selling is a bad word. And if you think that it is, then I don't know why you're listening to me right now. Because if you're going to start up a company, you got a lot of selling to do. But selling is not being a con man, selling is not I took advantage of someone. Selling is letting someone know, helping someone know that something is good and maybe better than they naturally would think it is. But, one should never do this unless it might really be better. I am all for moral and ethical straightforwardness on this stuff. I had a chat with a guy in one of my companies. I said, here, stock options. He said, nah, I'm not interested in them. I don't believe in them. I'm like, okay. But I realized, we were at a point where I could just pay him cash. He was like, just don't bring up stock options. I don't believe in them. I figured he'd probably been burned by before because they're not a sure thing. And he was like, look, just give me the money and I'll do the work. And I'm like, okay, do it, not a problem. And I had another time when you might use stock options. We were at a moment in the company where we were literally exploding. Selling was not a problem. Provisioning was the hardest problem. You know, we had all the problems that you'd love to have in a company. And literally I had bailed out of my office so like 3 people could crowd into my office and use it. And it was not a palatial office, it was just an office. But I was working out of my car, or out of my house. But back then we didn't work from home too often. And we needed office space. But of course, we're a internet service provider. So I couldn't just take any office space. We needed a data center, we needed a data center with office space built out with fiber connectivity. Our needs were tight. If we could get all that stuff without having to build it, it would be a real boon. We had VC financing, we had money, but we didn't have a lot of money. You never have all the money. And if we could get a deal, whatever. So we found the perfect building. Oh my God. It was an old savings and loan. Remember, there was a savings and loan crisis, and that wiped out lots of banks. This is a bank data center, man. It was gorgeous. It was perfect. Big machine rooms, cooling, generators, everything. And they were not buying it, but we went to rent it. And my tenant rep, who was guiding me in these things, good guy. We saw this guy 3 times. We looked it all over, and man, we made an offer. And the guy was like, and my tenant rep was like, you're not good enough for his building. And I like, really? He's like, look, this guy, this isn't like a REIT or something. This is an individual. He owns companies. He owns his building. You're not good enough for it. He's looking for an A tenant. He's looking for, a defense contractor, bank. He's looking for someone who's going to be an A tenant, prestige, 0 risk. And you guys are scruffy, man. You're a startup, Oh, you show up in Birkenstocks, it's just not the same. And I made one last pitch to him. I said, look, I'm going to go make him an offer. And I'm going to say, look, I'll give you stock options. And everybody was like, don't do that, But I was like, if I could get this building and get this done now, it would mean a lot. And, I offered him stock, and he turned it down. He's like, I was like, okay, man, and we found another old data center, actually the National Rifle Association's old data center in Beltsville, which is kind of weird. But, and they, anyway, I won't go into those stories. But, when we went public with that company, my accounting department put together a fax to the owner of that building, laying out exactly how much money he did not get because he had not taken the shares. So, and I was like, dudes, you guys are being kind of mean. And they're like, oh yeah, we're being mean. That guy ran us around in circles, demanding every damn thing, la la la, with no intent of actually winning us. Yeah. So yeah, so sometimes, taking the stock may have been smarter. It's a couple $1,000,000. So but you want to try to get this right, and it requires some really difficult thinking. Traditionally, if one person starts a company, well, then they own 100% of the company. And I know that it's their idea and it's their thing. And, I mean, I've been there, right? I've done this, and in your mind, you kind of like, yeah, man, I mean, it's mine, you know, but what you don't want to do, and this is a mistake that a lot of people make, you don't want to look back later and go, I should have compensated some of these guys better. Because at some moment, when you got 10 guys, 100 guys that non-gender term here, but 100 people, and working for you and doing this and making the company fly. I'm not going to say it's not yours, but the point is, it's not all yours. Without these people, are you really going to get where you're going? Now, there's a battle that goes on of greed. Everybody's got greed. This is where you'll start to find that greed and that moral and ethical sense sort of, you have to wrestle a little. And, you're like, I'm not, man, 20% of the company is a lot to give away. 40% of the company is a lot to give away. But again, though, you're trying to set the company up for long-term success. There's so much that can go wrong and derail this thing or hurt this thing or have it, it turns into a $50 million company. You're like, wow, that's great. And, but in the back of your mind, you're kind of like, this probably could have been 100 million, 200, could have been a $1 billion company. I don't know. And so what you're talking about here is actually an important kind of part of thinking about this. But that's why the tools are, don't just give away chunks of stock. The tools are set up an option plan that is manageable. These shares in this company are part of your fuel and part of what it is going to take to really make this happen, to bring people in, to incent people. And you hope. I had once said to people, an early group at one of my companies, said, what's the goal? I said, my goal is for all of you to be able to walk out of here with $1 million, or to be able to walk out of this situation maybe and not have to work again, even though I know all of you will work again, because of course that's what we do. None of these people were looking to retire at 30, and we had a meeting at one point, after the IPO, and I had said, my goal is to send you out of here with like $1 million in a briefcase, and someone reminded me and said, you owe us briefcases. Didn't get the briefcases. And they were right. And so, I was in Vegas on a sales call for the company. And I walked into, a luggage place and I said, I'll take 5 of those or whatever it was, and, had them delivered because, I did say $1 million in a briefcase, but I think they all got their million or whatever it was. And so your goal is but you have to figure this stuff out. You have to, and I've had in my companies, people who didn't get compensated right in the stock option plan, and I've done things like, paid off their house, paid off their car, stuff like that, where I'm just like, that guy did not get what he deserved. She did not get what she deserved. I mean, and as an individual, you can go augment these things, but you don't want to set. Also sets a weird precedent. You gave money to them, but you didn't give money to me or whatever. It is really valuable to the company, important on a company basis, and to the founder or founders on a personal basis, that you try the best you can to set something up where people get remuneration. They get fair pay and some, if it goes well. I mean, if it doesn't go well, yeah, you can wallpaper your bathroom with your stock
Doug,
paper. Yep.
can I interrupt you, please? We have only a few minutes. So we have a question about, can you please share and discuss your thoughts about a student startup having a faculty or more than one faculty as co-founders?
You know, I assume that the faculty are going to keep their faculty jobs, right? And those, go back, I'll go back a couple slides. Go to another one. There. What you need to do is think to yourself, where of these categories do those people actually fit in? Because you can be one of these without being the other ones. So they can be a founder. Notice that, or they can be in founders maybe, and could even be a founder. It's interesting because founder and founders don't necessarily work for the company as employees and stuff. These are a bunch of different strangely shaped pigeonholes, and you can figure out where people fit. You have an issue. I'm not speaking, by the way, to university rules issues. Allah actually, can talk about that. I am not talking about that at all. So you have to think, these guys, these faculty people have day jobs, very important day jobs, and so I'm not sure. You have to gauge, how much work are they going to do on your thing? Now, it could very well be that it's their thing and your thing. And so now we run into a situation, and I'm actually facing this right now with a little company I'm trying to help. You have to, so a company is a timeline. And when you set up this sort of stock option plan, is a point in time. And you can change it and all later, but it's a point in time. You're setting up a tool that you can use through the timeline to manage stuff a little. You may have to reward people in the stock plan for things they have already done. So if right now we're going to set this up and it's T-0, it's 0 time. There's T, or there's net, or it's T0, sorry. There's T- time back here, Maybe, they've been working on this and you've been working on this, for a year, half a year, whatever. And that only now are you bringing it together to build a company at T0, start something right here formally. So you not only have to look at what are people's roles going to be going forward, and how do I structure compensation for them? And that's where maybe this slide is useful to say, what are these guys? How do they slot in? What are they? Are they this and that, but not that? Are they that and that, but not that? Are they just that? But also in this T- time, T- time, so you may do a stock option grant for, fully vested, for past work that then would not do any vesting at all, would not exist going forward. If you had somebody who had done stuff in the past, but is not going to be some part of the company going forward. Or you might, and I should say, you probably have 2 different stock grants for someone who has done stuff in the past and will continue in the future. That could be 2 different grants. You just say, look, here's, 2% of the company, man, boom, fully vested, done. There it is. You can leave and it's always yours because look at all this great work you did. Oh, well, I was planning on doing some work for you in the future. Excellent. How about and then we'll engineer a stock grant going forward. How about another 2% vesting every 3 years? How's that sound? Bob, Jane. Or um, you know, that's pretty much it. Do not let the past drive the future. It's T0. All things are here. Things end, things continue, or things go forward, but they may not be the same stock plan, or they may not be the same stock grant under this plan. I hope that makes some sense. I know that there are complications where you have, faculty, and you have to figure out how to fit them into an integrated stock plan. And if you want to talk more about that later, let me know.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everyone. Just also wanted to let you know that Doug is also available for meeting one-on-one if you would like to schedule some time with him. I will drop in a link. You can visit this link and schedule time to talk to Doug if you would like to discuss it, not on a webinar, but one-on-one.
Right. And we can get on a whiteboard and scribble and scrawl and, we can do things like get Alla and other people to kind of come in and, help out with it and, sanity check me.
Yep. Well, thank you. Thank you, Doug. Thank you to everyone who logged in and stayed until the end and asked. Thank you for all the great questions. See you next time.